It was a warm evening in Austin, the kind that tries to pretend it's still summer but smells like fall. The sun was hiding behind thick clouds, the kind that made everything feel a little duller, like the light had forgotten how to shine. We were all gathered around the dining table: me, my brother Caleb, his wife Julia, their daughter, my mom, and Uncle Roy. It was supposed to be one of those easy family dinners, nothing special, just food and laughter and catching up. But something felt off. I watched the way they talked over one another, voices overlapping like traffic noise. Every time I tried to join in, someone cut me off without meaning to. Or maybe they meant to. I wasn't sure anymore. I smiled, nodded, tried to laugh when they laughed. My voice felt quieter than usual. My throat, tight. Today was my birthday. No one remembered. I dropped little hints throughout the evening. Mentioned that I saw the same chocolate cake I loved growing up at the bakery near my office. Remember when Dad used to get that one for special days? I said, soft, almost hopeful. Julia was talking about her new yoga instructor. Caleb was too busy bragging about his Tesla. I tried again, something about how September always felt like a turning point. This time of year makes me think about milestones, I said, glancing around. Nothing, just nods and someone asking if the mashed potatoes had garlic in them, like I wasn't even there. I sat there, watching my family. Caleb, loud and proud, always needing the spotlight. Julia, polished and perfect, sipping her wine like she was in a commercial. Mom, quiet but distant, like she'd been floating since Dad died. And Uncle Roy, well, he was just there, present in body, but his mind somewhere between bourbon and baseball. They weren't bad people, just absorbed. Or maybe I'd trained them to be that way. Always the listener, always the helper, never the one anyone paused for. My eyes fell on my niece, Anna. She was talking about her school dance. I tried to join in, asked what color her dress was. She shrugged, looked past me like I was part of the furniture. I chewed my food slowly, barely tasting it. It wasn't that they forgot. It's that they never saw me to begin with. When I was younger, I used to think silence meant peace. That if I didn't make waves, things would stay calm. I was the quiet one, the one who remembered birthdays, anniversaries, every graduation and baby shower. I'd show up early to help decorate, stay late to clean. I'd listen, always listen. After Dad passed, I kept thinking they'd need me, that maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. But grief made people selfish, and I became the ghost that moved chairs and refilled glasses. I sat through Caleb's monologue about business deals and Julia's Pilates certification. I nodded when they talked about Anna's dance coach and Mom's new neighbor. No one asked me about my week, or my new project at the nonprofit, or how I felt about anything. Caleb made a joke about my love life. Still waiting for Mr. Right? Or did you finally give up and get a cat? Laughter. Quick, loud, dismissive. I smiled. That same smile I've worn for years. Polished, practiced. I told them I'd been working on a mentorship program for underprivileged girls. Tried to share a story about a student who reminded me of myself. Julia interrupted. Something about a friend going to Bali. Anna knocked over her water. It splashed onto my dress. Oops, she said, grabbing a napkin and dabbing her phone instead of my lap. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't care. I stayed seated, stayed still. My mind, though, was moving, watching, recording. Then came the toast. Caleb stood up, clinking his glass like a CEO at a press conference. To family, he said. To Julia's promotion. To all of us who've made something of ourselves. His eyes never landed on me, not once. I lifted my glass, barely sipping. My fingers were cold. The cake came out a few minutes later. Chocolate, 3 layers with decorative frosting. For a moment I felt something, but it wasn't mine. It was for Anna. Her dance recital was coming up next week. Everyone clapped. Cameras out. Flash. Laughter. Joy. I excused myself. In the hallway, the air felt thinner. My phone buzzed in my hand. A work email. A weather alert. A reminder for a dentist appointment. Nothing from them. Not a single message. Not a call. Not even a text. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes, and counted to 10. I didn't cry. I opened my eyes. looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Still here, still standing. I walked back in, sat down. I decided then I wasn't going to say a word, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to see just how long it would take for them to remember, or if they ever would. I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that tells you everyone's already gone and they didn't bother to say goodbye. The smell of leftover garlic bread still lingered, stale and bitter, as if even the food remembered more than they did. I wandered into the kitchen. The table was still messy, half-drunk glasses, a napkin stained with lipstick, someone's scarf thrown across a chair like they'd been in too much of a rush to care. I stood there a moment, staring at it all. It amazed me how easily people could leave behind evidence of joy they didn't even try to share. I poured myself a cup of coffee, holding the mug like it was the only warm thing left in that house. I took a slow sip, eyes fixed on the phone lying on the counter. No missed calls, no texts. Of course not. But then a notification popped up. It wasn't a message to me. It was a screenshot, accidentally sent by my cousin Jason. It looked like it was meant for someone else. Or maybe for everyone else, just not me. I tapped it without much thought. The image was blurry at first, then came into focus. A group chat. Title: Real Family Planning, No Cass Ver. My heart thudded. I froze. I stared at it, hoping it was some kind of joke, some misnamed group, a prank. But when I scrolled further, it was worse than I could have imagined. They were all in it: Caleb, Julia, Jason, even Mom. The messages weren't just petty, they were cruel. There was one from Caleb. If she asks about Dad's will again, just smile and nod. She still thinks he gave her something. LOL. Julia had chimed in. She's got that sad librarian vibe. Nobody takes her seriously, so just let her feel useful. It keeps her out of the way. And Jason of all people, wrote, let's keep her close until the reading. Once it's done, we cut the cord. She's not going to fight back. She never has. I scrolled faster. I couldn't stop. They mocked my job, called it volunteer nonsense. They tore apart the way I dressed. One line stuck with me like a knife. She's always been background noise. I dropped the phone. My legs went weak. I slid down to the floor, hands shaking, breath short. I whispered it to no one, to the empty room. They planned this. It wasn't just forgetting. It was removing me. Slowly, over time. With smiles. With toasts. With silence. I thought back. Years of moments. Invitations that got lost. Decisions made without me. Julia once claimed an email must have gone to my spam. A dinner I wasn't free for, even though no one asked. I had told myself stories for so long. That they were busy. That I was too different. That maybe I just didn't ask for enough. But no, they didn't forget me. They erased me. Deliberately. I sat there, knees to my chest, letting the tears come. But it wasn't sadness that made me cry. It was clarity. Something cold settled inside me. Eventually, I picked the phone back up. I looked at the screenshot again, not with grief this time, with intent. I read it all over again. Slower, methodical, voice by voice. Caleb's arrogance, Julia's calculation, Jason's flippant cruelty, and Selena. Selena wasn't just echoing, she was leading, talking about documents, suggesting Cass might need a break from the family right now, mental health and all. Like I was unstable, like they were setting up a story. They were building a case, a narrative to push me out and make it look like kindness. They were playing a game, and they thought I wouldn't see the board. I saved the screenshot, backed it up to a hidden cloud folder I created on the spot. Then I wiped the message, locked them out of any access to my devices. They wouldn't know what I knew, not yet. I booked an appointment with a lawyer, someone recommended by a friend, discreet, experienced in sensitive estate matters. I told myself it was just research, just information. But even as I said it, I smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't worn in years. They made one mistake. They underestimated the quiet one. Later, I sat in Dad's old chair by the window, looking out at the garden he loved. He used to say that weeds were just plants that lost their purpose. They've been planting weeds in my name for years, I muttered. I reached for my notebook and began writing things down. Dates, comments, documents to check. I wasn't going to fight them head on. Not yet. They didn't know I'd woken up, but they would. I came back from a long walk, hoping the movement would settle my head. The streets were quiet, late afternoon light stretching long shadows across the pavement. My body moved on autopilot, but my mind was still replaying that group chat over and over, each line cutting deeper. When I stepped inside, the house felt too still, like a museum of someone else's life. I set my keys down and started picking up things around the living room, folding a blanket, stacking dishes. Anything to keep my hands moving. Under a pile of old books on the coffee table, I found a small jewelry box. My mother's. Just the sight of it hit me like a wave. I sat down with it, her voice echoing in my mind, the words she'd said when I was a teenager. Never let silence make you small. I closed my eyes, and I was back at that Easter dinner 2 years ago. The whole family crowded around the table, noise and chatter spilling over like wine. I had suggested an idea for Dad's foundation, a scholarship program for local kids. No one acknowledged it. 10 minutes later, Caleb repeated the exact idea, and suddenly it was brilliant, visionary. They applauded him. I remember looking at my father across the table. He caught my eye, gave me a small nod, and later pulled me aside in the kitchen. "That was your idea, not his," he whispered, squeezing my shoulder. "Don't let them take your voice." I'd laughed it off back then, telling myself it didn't matter who got the credit. But now, sitting here, I saw it differently. Selena always made sure I sat at the far end of the table, furthest from Dad. I used to think it was just her being organized. Now I understood. It was about keeping me out of his earshot, about making me invisible even when I was in the room. My so-called grace had been read as weakness. Every "oh, it's fine" from me had been a green light for them to take more. I pulled out a notebook and began scribbling down memories, birthdays skipped, calls ignored, gifts returned unopened. It wasn't random, it was a pattern, a strategy. Any time I'd tried to bring up legal or financial planning, the subject got changed to something trivial. My love life, someone's vacation, a story about a neighbor's dog. I remembered my aunt's syrupy voice at Thanksgiving. "Honey, you don't need to worry about money. You're the spiritual one." They'd built a whole character for me in their play, the soft one, the harmless one, the one who stays out of the way. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not this time. I caught my reflection in the black screen of the TV, a faint, hollow version of myself. "Who did I let them turn me into?" I murmured. The silence in the house answered back. I reached into a box under the coffee table and pulled out some of Dad's old letters. He'd written to me about plans for my education, his hopes for my independence. In one letter, in his scrawled handwriting, he'd written, "You have the patience of steel. Use it when the storm comes." My fingers traced the words. Maybe this was the storm. On the chair nearby lay the scarf I'd seen yesterday, draped casually as if forgotten. Selena's scarf. Now it looked like a calling card, a token of fake concern. I picked it up, smelled the faint perfume, and felt something harden inside me. I folded it once, twice, then tossed it into a bag I'd set aside for donations. A small act, but it felt like shedding a skin. "When people tell you who they are, believe them the first time," I whispered, hearing my mother's voice again, but this time as armor, not comfort. I turned back to Dad's desk. In the corner of his old laptop, I saw an icon I hadn't noticed before. Drafts. My stomach tightened. One was titled Final Instructions. The cursor hovered over it. I knew that once I opened it, whatever image of my family I still had would be gone for good. I clicked. I sat in my condo, thunder growling outside, as though the sky knew what was coming. Rain tapped weak rhythms against the windows. I paced the kitchen, rehearsing my lines, heart steady but fierce. "Lead with calm clarity, not hurt," I told myself, my therapist's mantra echoing in my mind. I closed my eyes, inhaled, set boundaries before dialing. I whispered to myself, "If he lies, I hang up. This is not about fixing. It's about truth." The call rang twice. Then Ellis's voice, familiar, light. Hey, Cass. Everything okay? I had to swallow the sharp edge in my throat before I spoke. Ellis, I need honesty, I began. I mentioned Easter, Dad, hints of legacy, asked about that group chat, asked why I saw messages that said they never intended me to inherit a thing. I asked if he'd had a hand in it, then held my breath. He laughed, warm at first. Then voice changed, clipped, defensive. You're overthinking this, Cassian. We talk like that sometimes. It's family teasing. He said I was too sensitive. He suggested maybe I was going through something, like a midlife crisis. He accused me of assuming the worst. He told me everyone loved me, that I'd always be part of the family. I repeated a line I saw in the chat, word for word, watching his tone shift. He dodged each point, shifting blame. Then he ended. I hope you find peace, Cass. But sometimes you push people away. The line went dead. Silence filled the room, monstrous. My muscles shook. I stared at the phone, disbelief mixing with anger. Did he really just gaslight me? Did he just pretend to care while denying every truth I held? I closed my eyes, reached for the journal I keep in my drawer, flipped through my writing, dates, phrases, evidence. I wrote, "When someone tells you you're crazy for remembering pain, they're betting on your silence." I reread old entries. The notes connected, decade-long patterns of betrayal I couldn't deny anymore. A memory surfaced. When we were kids, Cousin Liam broke a window and Ellis blamed me. Mom believed him immediately. I'd spent days apologizing, ashamed, while no one asked what really happened. That memory tasted bitter now. Everything I thought was confusion was in fact clarity waiting to be claimed. I opened my laptop and created a folder named Truth Files. I dragged screenshots, voicemails, old emails, all into it. I made subfolders, transcripts, documents, receipts. This was no longer waiting. I sketched a plan of what to expose, when, how. I practiced phrases in my head, not to argue, but to end their gaslighting loops. I imagined a table in some gathering, me with facts, them fumbling for excuses. On the bathroom mirror, I wrote in lipstick, "Silence is not noble when used as a cage." I stared at it until the words burned into my skin. If they wounded me, I would not shrink. I vowed not to lose myself in their stories any longer. I opened my old voicemail box. There, one recording. Dad's voice, warm and low. "Don't let them use your kindness as cover, baby girl." I played it twice. His tone, unwavering, became something I anchored to. I set it as my ringtone. Let every call remind me of what I was defending. I deleted Ellis's contact. No more hoping, no more waiting. My fingers hovered over my calendar app. I typed, "Family dinner, one last time." I picked the date, hit send. My breath caught. This was a line I would not cross again. I walked into that restaurant early, wanting everything predictable. The private room was quiet, lights soft, table arranged so I could see every face as they walked in. I picked a seat that gave me full sightlines. No surprises. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who always overlooked me now showed up for a dinner labeled Important Legacy Update. I watched Ellis swagger in, Julia smoothing her dress, Selena greeting others with that practiced warmth. Waiters brought drink menus, bread plates, and tension hovered like an unseen guest. I told myself, let them be grand. This was their idea. They asked for this stage. When everyone settled, I raised my glass. I thanked them for coming, tone gentle. I spoke of Dad's values, of dignity, fairness, of legacy beyond money. I wove in memories without naming names, rooms I helped build, decisions I watched fade in shadow, being omitted from moments I once led. I paused just enough for them to catch wind. Then I said, I've seen conversations that would make Dad's heart stop, not from shock, from shame. I didn't explain. I let them feel. Ellis snorted. Oh, come on, Cass. Dramatic much? He leaned forward, shaking his head. You make everything a speech. Why can't you just relax? Selena added in that soft, mocking tone. Sweetheart, you okay? This sounds rehearsed. Don't overdo it. Jasper laughed across the table. Is this dinner or a Dateline script? Others giggled quietly. Plates shifted. The room felt small, crowded by disbelief. I swallowed, felt anger simmer beneath the surface. I saw how sure they were, sure that I wouldn't fight, that I would let this slide. I didn't raise my voice. I said, I know everything, and I've made sure others will too. I placed a sealed envelope on the table, unmarked, ominous. This isn't the will, I said. This is reflection. I let that sit. No rush. No reveal yet. Sometimes your legacy is what people whisper when you're gone, I added quietly, or what you say when you think no one reads it. Then I stood, slowly. I left the envelope behind, not as bait, just as testimony. Outside, the night air hit me sideways, cool, expectant. My chest tightened. I replayed their faces, fragile humor, forced smiles, laughter edged with dread. My feet moved forward, but my heart stayed in that room. In my mind, I heard Dad's voice. They laugh loudest when they fear your silence. I reminded myself, I didn't need them to believe me. I needed them to know I wasn't afraid. My phone buzzed just as I reached the car. Unknown number. We need to talk, tonight. My breath stuttered. I didn't recognize it, but I felt I already knew the sender. The Vale estate felt solemn as I walked up the driveway, dusk settling in behind me. The front lights were on. Inside, shadows danced against the walls. I clutched the sealed envelope in my purse. It weighed heavy, not with paper, but with intent. The family was already gathered in the living room, murmuring with false warmth. I stepped through the door, paused at the threshold, scanning every face. Ellis looked confident. Selena posed with easy smiles. My mother's face was neutral. The air smelled faintly of old wood and anxious breaths. I told myself, they bet I'd stay silent forever. Tonight I'll test that. Selena cleared her throat and began the evening's agenda in measured tone. Speeches, updates, plans. I rose before she could finish. My voice was calm, steady. I thanked them for being present and spoke of Dad's legacy in terms of integrity and truth. Slowly, I placed the envelope on the long mahogany table. I said, before we move forward, we should know what's been hidden. I paused, eyes flicked. No one moved. I didn't open it. I simply let its presence sit. Threat made physical. The room held breath. Someone cleared theirs. Tension spread. I took a breath and spoke with clarity. I laid out what I had uncovered. Chat logs, manipulated documents, entries that had been altered. I exposed how decisions had been made without consultation. Money moved, voices silenced. Then I looked at Selena's hand. And this ring? I gestured. Her fingers trembled. The ring came into view. The heirloom that had vanished years ago now sat on her finger like a boast. She gasped. The ring matched the one I had kept hidden all these years. The room froze. Chaos erupted. Voices overlapped. Selena tried to speak, fumbling out, I found it in your drawer. I thought you left it behind. Ellis raised his voice. My mother gasped. Others demanded explanations, but I stood firm. I replied, you wore it publicly. That was proof of what you planned all along. Their accusations came rapid, but I held their gazes. I let the silence bite between their words. I lifted the ring with care and spoke to them, not angrily, but with purpose. I didn't come tonight to destroy. I came to expose, but I will not be erased. I held the ring, then laid it gently on the table in front of them. Tomorrow, I said, the contents of this envelope go public. Your laughter tonight will be your regret tomorrow. As I stepped away, I left space between us. I withdrew to the doorway, letting the room fill with their stunned reactions. My phone buzzed just as I reached the hall. A new email popped up. They're watching you. My eyes latched onto the sender. It was the lawyer I had reached out to earlier. My heart accelerated. The envelope I never opened in front of everyone had already begun its work. The hall was alive with anticipation when I stepped into the Vale Grand Ballroom. Chandeliers glowed softly, portraits of ancestors watched from the walls, and seating was arranged like a courtroom. I slipped inside, heart steady, dressed in black with a white scarf that matched a promise. I carried my evidence folder beneath my coat, hidden but present. Faces turned. A hush fell as I passed. They believed this night belonged to Selena and her polished spiel. They underestimated me. Tonight, I claimed my moment. Selena rose at the podium, voice smooth, thanking donors, speaking of philanthropy, preserving legacy. I sat among guests, family, board members, old friends, all polite, all watching. I caught murmurs, sideways glances. Then I noticed the large framed family photo above the stage. My heart stopped a little. The image had been altered. Selena now stood in the place I once stood. My figure was blurred, moved to the periphery. They had done this before. It was evidence, vivid and cruel. I stood, microphone in hand. Selena's eyes hardened. The audience quieted to a hush. I asked permission to share something that could change what everyone thought they knew. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered on. I held the crowd. No whispers. The first slide showed the original family portrait. The next showed the new version. Me removed. Selena shifted closer to my father's gaze. Gasps echoed. Eyes widened. Selena jerked. I calmly explained how the photo had been manipulated to erase me. My voice firm but gentle. Next, I revealed group chat logs, email snippets, and the ring photo. The heirloom ring, once mine, now proudly worn by her. Each slide landed like a punch. I narrated with precision, letting silence swell between revelations. Then conflict erupted. Selena leapt from the podium. "Delete those slides," she spat. Ellis was on his feet, yelling about defamation. Some relatives protested, others froze. I didn't flinch. I replied softly, "I offered you a chance to respond, but you chose illusions instead of truth." A cousin, Cressida, who rarely spoke in meetings, stood and applauded. The crowd stirred. The balance shifted. I addressed everyone. "You have 24 hours to apologize publicly, or I release this whole folder." I scooped up my paperwork, buttoned my coat, and walked out. Shock and whispers followed me through the doors, behind me. Stunned faces, broken composure, betrayal unfolded. I walked back into the ballroom after the dramatic exit. The lights were dim, the room tense, the hush felt heavy. The projection screens glowed faintly in the background. I steadied my breath. My folder, the one I nearly left behind, was now in my hand. I reviewed my notes, checking names, timestamps, voices. I told myself, tonight they will see what they tried to hide. I pressed the remote. The first slide lit up. The first image showed side-by-side versions of that family portrait, the original and the altered. I let the audience absorb it. I spoke calmly, reading aloud chat messages, email excerpts, recorded voice clips. Each revelation landed in silence. Selena's face tightened. Ellis looked away. I moved into financial documents, account transfers, trust changes, signatures forged. I named who changed titles, who signed documents behind closed doors. As I went through the timeline, evidence reinforced what I had suspected all along. The gallery overlay showed patterns, small moves over years, orchestrated. The past manipulations became impossible to dismiss. Their faces shifted. Trust crumbled. Selena interrupted, her voice trembling but sharp. She launched a counterattack. She projected a contract she claimed I signed, relinquishing my rights under duress. Guests murmured, some gasped. She framed me as desperate, unstable, someone grasping at scraps. I held steady. I asked for proof of origin, demanded validation, witnesses. I said, "You forged what you could not persuade me to sign." The tension snapped tight. I presented my counter-evidence, timestamps, digital hashes, draft versions, email threads. The forged clause collapsed under scrutiny. I confronted Selena directly. "You built lies on my silence. Tonight I dismantle them piece by piece." I triggered the final slides, independent audits, legal clearances, certified documents. The audience shifted in their seats. Selena's color drained. The illusion unraveled. My voice cracked slightly. "I didn't want war, but I will defend my name." I glanced up at Dad's portrait, imagining him nodding. The hall held breath, silence louder than applause. I stepped off the stage. I let the evidence speak for me, walked past gawking faces. My phone buzzed as I passed the doorway. I looked down, a new alert. Class action suit filed in your name. I froze. The betrayal expanded. More than family was involved. I paused before leaving. Tonight, the tables had turned, but the fight was far from over. 2 weeks after the storm, the noise had moved on to television and newspapers. The headlines kept running, the pundits kept speculating. I stayed off every screen. I drove down to the small beach house my mother left me. Weathered wood, big windows, the sound of waves even with doors closed. Here, there was no audience. Just me. The sand under my feet felt like a reset button. I walked it at dawn, at dusk, until the air on my face began to scrape away the leftover adrenaline. I brought a box of her letters, faded ink on folded paper. Reading them at night, I started to understand that this part of the story wasn't about victory at all. It was about survival, about finally learning how to let go without forgetting. From the deck, I'd watch the news. The screen in the corner of the room showed scrolling text. Assets frozen, investigations underway, Selena's companies losing contracts. The same people who clapped for her speeches now posting statements about values and integrity. Some of the relatives who had stayed silent began to come forward, slipping into my inbox with words like, "Sorry," and "We always knew." I read them, deleted most. The cost of truth is always paid in full. One paper ran an op-ed titled, "Inheritance is a Bloodless War." They weren't wrong, and under all of it ran a new rumor that someone from inside had been feeding the press. A whisper that one of them had finally crossed the line back to me. That whisper had a face when Marcus knocked on the door. A cousin I'd long counted as neutral, maybe cowardly. He stood on the porch, eyes down, holding an old USB drive like it was a live wire. He said he'd been leaking documents anonymously. He said he'd been afraid. He handed me a recording of Selena and her lawyer planning how to corner me with a forged contract. "I stood by too long," he said, his voice breaking. That silence ends today. For a moment, gratitude caught me off guard. Not for justice, it was too late for clean justice, but for courage, from an unexpected place. In town later that week, I sat with my attorneys and signed the final revisions. Control of the estate was mine. I told them I wanted a portion of the $10 billion to go into a scholarship fund under my mother's name. "You inherit more than money," I wrote in my draft statement that night. "You inherit silence, shame, power. I choose to pass on truth instead." It wasn't for press. It was for me, for the next generation. I didn't owe the public an explanation. I owed myself a life not built on hiding. At dusk one evening, I opened the old piano in the living room, keys yellowed, still in tune. I played the song my mother loved, slow and halting. The house was quiet, but no longer heavy. I began a letter to myself, sealing it for a day when I might forget how this felt. "Not all healing is loud," I wrote. "Some of it is just waking up and choosing peace." Then my phone buzzed. An email. Subject line, "To the real owner of Vale Corp. You were right all along." The sender's name stopped me cold. An old enemy from the beginning. Someone I'd thought long gone. I closed the piano lid and stared at the screen. The story wasn't over. It was just turning into something new.